First of all, a big namaste to all of you. Greetings. This is how we do our greetings in India. I am well. As you know, in India, we are 1.3 billion people. And currently, India is in a national, what we call as lockdown. It has led to a lot of disruptions here. But at the same time, I want to reach out to my friends in Italy. You have paid a very heavy price, and our deepest condolences to all those who have lost their loved ones. So as I was saying, first of all, condolences to our friends in Italy. We feel very sad. When I read the first reports, my thoughts were with all of you. But I also feel that we as a community of people, friends, whether you are in Pavia, we are here in New Delhi. Some of you are from other countries. I think you have your own individual national experience and you have a personal experience. And I feel that if we all are resolute, as we say, resolute, and we will be able to come out of this as the world has come out of similar challenges in the past. So these are my introductory remarks. And back to you, Jamba. However you want to steer this, let me know, and I'll be happy to offer my own thoughts. Jamba?
Thanks a lot. Very kind of you. Please, whenever you want, the floor is yours, Uday.
Do the other participants want to give me your names and your country? That will help me.
If you go on the right side, you can click on people and you'll have the list. But please, I invite each one of you to switch on your microphone and to very shortly present your name, what you are doing, what you are, and the country of origin. Please go.
Okay. Well,
Ahmed, start.
Hi, my name is Maria. I am from Mexico, and this year I am a CHICOPS student, and actually right now I am in Italy. So nice to meet you.
Maria from Mexico, I'm writing down,
Yeah.
Okay.
So, hi, my name is Wasma. I'm from Sudan. I'm PhD student in genetics in Bavia. Nice to meet you.
Bye. Next.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Fatia Butara. I'm from Sudan. Now
Sudan.
I'm a PhD student at University of Brescia.
Okay. Next.
Yes, hi. My name is Waad Abed. I'm a PhD student in University of Trieste. Nice to meet you.
From which country are you from? Why?
From Palestine. Palestine.
Okay, very good. Hello. Next.
Hello.
Go.
Hi. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening. Namaste. I'm Mageshwaran from India.
Okay.
Yeah, very great to see you, sir. Sir, I just want to know about the situation in India regarding there is a lockdown for 21 days by our Prime Minister. So I just need some briefing regarding COVID in India because I just having a plan to came out to India. So I need your suggestion about this. Yeah, I'm a little bit scary about here.
I understand.
Yeah, hello. Hello.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Muhammad. Nice to meet you, Mr. Uday, and greetings to everybody on the chat. My name is Muhammad. I'm a Jordanian, but I live in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Okay. Next.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ammar Meza. I'm from Palestine. It's honor to join here to see everyone, and I want to thank you, and I hope everything will be fine.
Next.
Someone else?
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Agao. I came from Ethiopia. Right now, I am a student at the University of Torino, Italy.
Very good. Next.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, go.
Okay, so here we have Paolo. I'm from Italy. Francisco from El Salvador.
And I'm Harshita. I'm from India. We are from the GLODEP program.
Oh, very good. Very good. So that's it. Everyone on board?
Hello? Hello? My name is Katerina and I'm from Ukraine. And I'm from Pakistan. We are GLODEP students.
Oh, very good.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Rubina Ansari from Pakistan, and I'm doing a PhD in University of Bashkar.
Oh, very good. Okay. So we have everyone now. Any more to introduce themselves? Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
So
go.
this is Bethlehem from the GLODEP program. Right now I'm in Czech Republic and I'm from Ethiopia.
Very good. A very interesting interaction from Czech Republic, Ethiopia, India, Italy. Awfully nice. This is the globalization. Go on.
Yes. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmad from Jordan. I'm doing PhD in water environmental engineering in Brescia.
Very good. So we have everyone on board now?
Go.
Okay. We haven't missed anyone, right? Okay. Well, again, hello to everyone. And since we have a few fellows from Ethiopia in the program, I thought I would just mention a small personal, aspect of me. I have retired from the Indian Navy, and I joined the Indian Navy in 1969, which is a long time ago.
Eddie's here, God's here, Amna's here, Ella's here.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm repeating what I said to our friends from Ethiopia and that part of the world, that I retired from the Indian Navy a few years ago. And just as a matter of anecdotal interest for you, I visited Ethiopia in 1970. We had come to a port called Massawa. And at that time, Emperor Haile Selassie was the emperor. And Ethiopia was one unified country. I just thought I would share that with you. 1970 is exactly 50 years ago. So that's one.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is we have 1 hour's time. And then from now we have about 45 minutes. Let me speak for about 15-20 minutes on security. And then if there is time, Jamba can help us to have a small discussion.
With pleasure.
So I want to make 3 big broad points based on my own study. I have been working on what we call as the conceptual underpinning of security as a concept and how it has evolved over the last 70, 80 years. My starting point is Hiroshima, Nagasaki, August 1945, to where we are now. And now we are talking about a world that is dealing with the COVID challenge. So my deduction or my distillation of the concept of security, it's also based on our experience here in India. So we are all creatures of language. If you have a thought in your mind, that thought acquires meaning through language and through word. What kind of a meaning do we give to a certain word or a concept. So when we talk about the word security, it is a concept. In our Indian understanding, and whatever be the writing that we have had, Indian thought, Indian philosophy, Indian ethics, the whole body of literature, the whole gene pool from which our language comes. I won't go into the detail, we don't have time, but I'll make the following point, that in a very Twitter kind of way, the concept of security is understood as well-being. That's two words in English, well, W-E-L-L hyphen being, B-E-I-N-G. You can translate this into your own language. It is the well-being of the individual, the human being. It is the well-being of the collective that you belong to. It can be your family. It can be your tribe. It can be your clan. It can be your village. It can be the town. You can go up what we call as the socio-political ladder till you come to the equivalent of the nation state. Or if you look at it historically, you can talk about a kingdom. You can talk about an empire. So the concept of security must relate to the individual who is the smallest or the beginning of the block and go all the way up to whatever be the collective identity that the individual belongs to. And in the Indian way of thinking about this, we often talk about an Indian writer, an Indian philosopher. His name is Chanakya, C-H-A-N-A-K-Y-A, Chanakya. And the distillation of what Chanakya writes about security and the state is that any kind of security, it has to be equitable. This is a very important word. Equitable means it must be fair. It must be as uniform as is possible for the individual, irrespective of status, gender, rich, poor. It must be equitable and applicable to all. It must be harmonious. This word harmonious in today's context is that the human security or the individual security must not be compromised because of state security, because of national security. We'll come to this point when we talk about the nuclear age, but just remember these two words, equitable and harmonious. And the third is, whatever be the kind of security that is produced by the state or by the individual, it must be sustainable. You must be able to afford your security. Afford security not just in terms of finance, money, fiscal value, but also in an ecological sense. Today we talk about global capitalism is not sustainable because it is extracting a very heavy price from nature. I mean, climate change is a good example of how the current understanding of economic security does not respect the aspect of sustainability. So therefore, in the United Nations, we talk about sustainable development goals, human security, etc. So this is, for me as an Indian analyst, as a person working in security, my base, that our understanding of security is derived from the meaning of the word and how is it translated into policy. Because the individual is dependent on the state for security. in the modern sense. We now have, for instance, wherever you live, whether you are in a small town, in a city, village, the state is represented by the law enforcement agencies. They can be near you, they can be far away from you. There is police, there is court, there is a code of conduct. So individual security, you pay taxes, you expect that the state will look after your individual security. And then you go up all the way to the level of national security, states have militaries, and so on and so forth. So if this is the understanding of security, this is the first broad point I wanted to make. Let us try and see how the world has interpreted security and how it has evolved policies for security. So the second big point I want to make is that technology shapes our understanding of security. So one very big technological punctuation for the world is Hiroshima, Nagasaki, 1945 August. So we talk about the world in a pre-atomic age, which is before August 1945, and a post-atomic age, which is after Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So from 1945 onwards, you find that the global discourse about security and global policies about security prioritized or foregrounded the nuclear weapon and the missile. So this became the dominant priority, policy priority for the whole global community, led by the United States and the former Soviet Union. And other states had to accept this broad global orientation. So as a result, the United States and the former Soviet Union, between them, acquired about 55,000 plus nuclear weapons. The most lethal were in submarines underwater. They could be fired across ranges of about 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. They could acquire a target, as they say, with a precision of 100 meters. So if you fired a nuclear weapon, hypothetically from the Atlantic Ocean, it could pick up a target over 7,000 kilometers in the vast former Soviet Union and land whichever be the target with an accuracy of 100 meters on either side. This was considered to be security, and both the United States and the former Soviet Union spent vast amounts of money. We have the US figure. In 1984 dollars, any of you who are economists can do the calculation, it was considered to be $6.1 trillion spent by the US on WMD, weapons of mass destruction. There was a very well-known US Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, a man called Robert McNamara. He became the World Bank president. He was very good in mathematics. And they did targeting. And one of the estimates was that if the United States carried out the first attack, about 28 to 30 million Soviet citizens would be killed. About. And if the Soviets retaliated, depending on which part of the American mainland they targeted, whether East Coast or West Coast or the Chicago area, the human casualties would be probably in the range of 10 to 12 million. So this was the way in which the global community, when we look back, prioritized security, and both sides agreed on a doctrine which today sounds very odd. It was called mutually assured destruction, MAD. Again, going back to language, MAD is a common word in the English language. It refers to a condition, a human condition of insanity. And the strategic doctrine I often argue when I used to write about this is that it's very Freudian. It reveals a very deep insecurity at the highest global level, that they believed that their security was based on mutual destruction. So if you take the logic forward, purely in terms of linguistics and semantic and the meaning of words, I have argued in other places that more than providing security, what the nuclear weapon and this exclusive understanding of security at the global level did was actually to try and assuage, to address a very deep insecurity. An insecurity that was triggered by the cloud of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the human experience of seeing or reading or knowing about what is called as the apocalyptic capability of the nuclear weapon. Apocalyptic, apocalypse, mass destruction. So by the time we come to the end of the Cold War, we have the former Soviet president, Gorbachev. Some of you may have heard his name, Mikhail Gorbachev. I am presuming that most of you were born after the end of the Cold War, after 91. But he was, I think, personally a remarkable man. He engaged in a dialogue with then US President Ronald Reagan, and they both agreed that this kind of pursuit of security, this policy of security, was not sustainable and it was not harmonious to the world, because it was extracting a very heavy price, both in terms of human lives and the cost, the economical cost to the US and the Soviet Union, and the environmental cost, because as you know, dealing with nuclear waste, radioactive material, it stays in the earth for 6,000 years plus, depending on what kind of radioactive material you are talking about. So you're contaminating the earth, and if you have a tragic accident like Fukushima in Japan, you're contaminating the ocean. And generations after us will have to deal with this. So it is not sustainable. It is not harmonious. It is not equitable. So in their own way, Reagan and Gorbachev agreed to reduce the nuclear weapons, by which time, of course, the former Soviet Union implodes because of what happened in Afghanistan, etc. See how history repeats itself, by the way. Afghanistan is linked to the end of empire in the modern period more than once. You can say the beginning of the end of the British Empire, the graveyard is Afghanistan. The beginning of the end of the former Soviet Union, the graveyard is Afghanistan. I hope this does not happen, but perhaps the beginning of the end of the US hegemony could also be Afghanistan, but that's a different subject. The end of the Cold War marked an understanding that security could not be pursued only with the nuclear weapon. So in conceptual terms, in the theory, in the study that those of us in security studies have done, there was a clear recognition that global security had to move from an exclusive definition and emphasis on weapons of mass destruction to a more inclusive understanding of security that would accommodate and give adequate importance to human security. So after the end of the Cold War, you could see that there was a rewiring of the global system. The former Soviet Union has disappeared. Russia emerges in a much smaller geography. The United States is seen as the only superpower. A historian called Francis Fukuyama wrote a very famous book called The End of History. And the reduction or the distillation is that communism has been defeated. Just as fascism was defeated with the end of World War II, when Italy, Germany, Japan were defeated at the end of World War II and fascism was an ideology that was rejected, that the global community had contained communism represented by the Soviet Union, and that now it was all capitalism. Because even China, which is a communist state, had embraced the essential elements of capitalism. That was the understanding. So I argue as a security analyst that in the post-Cold War period, for the first 2 decades when Bill Clinton was the president in the US, and you had Boris Yeltsin in Russia and other leaders in Europe, and Europe itself was getting together as a European Union, the world prioritized economic security, and they also, in a way, deified profit. So profit became the new God, the new Jesus, the new whatever. And every aspect of state activity was pursued in relation to how to maximize profit. The state was co-opted by the big multinational, and you found that major security decisions, policies were being determined purely by the consideration of profit and more economic or financial gains. And we then pursue a thought process where, while the Cold War said that security should be inclusive and should bring human security to the front, I make the point that the global community did not take this seriously. And therefore, we had the kind of economic policies where environment, climate was not given enough importance. And in many ways, I think you found human security getting compromised. So if you look at the world in macroeconomic terms, as they say, economic indicators, macroeconomic indicators, you find that in the period 1995 to roughly 2015, 20 years, it's a decent time to study global macroeconomic indicators. The short point I make is the rich became richer, the poor became poorer, and some of you, I'm sure, understand the Gini coefficient, Gini. You found that in global policies, the divide was not so much east-west, which it was in the Cold War. Now it had become north-south. North-south, not in geographic terms, not North Pole, South Pole, but north as in the rich part of the world. Even within countries, big countries, United States, Russia, Italy, Europe, you found that those who were affluent and rich, particularly big companies, big families, politically connected, elite, they were becoming richer, more endowed with assets. And the poorer part of the world, the South, the global South, it exists in North America, it exists in Europe, it exists in Asia, it exists in Africa. And all these 4 regions also have some representation of the global North, which is the very rich, very capable, very endowed community. So unfortunately, global security was again imbalanced. It projected itself as being inclusive. Therefore, the United Nations spoke about sustainable development, human security, and so on. But the reality is that the policy that was being pursued by the state did not respect or acknowledge human security. And now, I think the challenge for the world is we are dealing with the crisis of COVID, Corona, whatever we call it. And you can see that suddenly in a matter of about 2 months, if you say that beginning from the middle of January, when the world became aware of the scale of the problem, to where we are now, the end of March, there is a clear understanding that this has become perhaps the most complex security challenge to the human aspect of security. And not because the world has not seen pandemics in the past. When we all talk about the Spanish flu, and I'm sure later Professor Jamba Pariji can talk to you about the Spanish flu and Europe. Those of you who from other continents may know, Asia, the Indian subcontinent, paid a very high price at that time. We had 5 to 6 million people who died, if I remember right. I do not have the corresponding figures for Africa at that time. But the reality is that today the world and global leadership and the global society is aware that this COVID virus poses a new challenge because it is insidious, it transmits very fast, and it also has a higher mortality, as they say, than the other viruses that the world knows. And most importantly, I think personally there are two elements that are sui generis, very distinctive about COVID-19. One is that we do not know enough about it, meaning the world is learning as the virus is spreading. And secondly, this is a virus that is being tracked minute by minute because of new technology, because of internet, because of television, because of the way in which we all exchange information. And sometimes an information overload can lead to conclusions that may not be valid scientifically. The scientists or the people who know physical sciences in your group would understand that there is a concept called entropy. We use it in thermodynamics, entropy. Today, I think there is a social, technological, information-driven entropy that is also impacting how we perceive the COVID challenge, the virus challenge. It has induced a certain amount of panic. We can see this in India. I can see some pictures coming out of North America and Europe. We hope that they all deal with it. But let me close on this so that we have enough time to have a chat. My reading today as a security analyst is that today more than ever, President Gorbachev at that time, while talking about the nuclear weapon, had made a speech in the United Nations where I remember hearing this on radio at that time. It was 1987-88, if I remember right. He said, we have to accept that today, and he was talking about the context of the nuclear weapon, that global security is indivisible. I repeat, global security is indivisible. I submit for your consideration that if you fast forward from the end of the Cold War to where we are now, about 30 years plus, this tenet has never been more true. That today global security has become indivisible because of the challenge of the corona. And all countries, all societies are going to be differently impacted. There will be an economic impact. There will be a political impact. My sense is that there would be a strategic consequence. And the highest price will be paid by the less privileged, the poor, those who do not have enough resilience to be able to stay in safe houses, to have adequate hospital and medical attention. But we hope that with the right policies and with the professionals, the doctors, the nurses, all the fantastic work they're doing, people in the private sector, those who are bringing new technologies, new vaccines, new ventilators, new breathing techniques, not techniques, but equipment. All of this will contribute in its own way. It's a non-linear effort. I remain an optimist. I think the world will prevail. We are more than 6 billion people, very creative. They're good people, people who want the world to prosper, who want their communities, their families, their societies to prosper, and I think we will. So let me close on this and say that you sitting in Pavia are in a very, I think, special place in Europe. Pavia is one of the oldest universities in Europe, if I remember right. And I think whatever creative work you do, whatever knowledge you contribute will have its own, I think, relevance. If there is time, I will give you a Indian story, but that can wait, about how the individual can contribute to global security. But this is my last point, that whatever security the world now decides to pursue after COVID-19, it must be equitable. It must be harmonious. It must be sustainable. And this spans the entire web of nature. It is not just human security. The bird, the animal, the tree, the soil, the air, the water. I mean, it's almost cosmic in its understanding. So it has to be equitable, harmonious, and sustainable in this very, very, I would say, vast universe of which the earth is only a very small part. So Jamba, I'll stop here. I think we have about 15 minutes if the timeline.
Thanks a lot. It has been quite an inspiring speech, Uday, but you raised my and our curiosity speaking about this Indian story. Go on with telling us what about this Indian story, because I like them a lot. I'm also just a little bit Indian, being honorary member, proud honorary member of the Indian Society of Pediatric Surgery. Therefore, go on with your story, please.
Okay, I'll tell you my small story. I am now almost 70 years. And as I grow older, I feel that there is a lot of wisdom, in our stories that have come to us from centuries. We heard it from our elders. Our elders must have heard it from their elders. And I'm sure each of you have your own stories based on your language and your culture and where you come from. We have one story that I had heard when I was a young child, and it goes as follows. We have something called an epic in India. It's called the Ramayana. It is related to Hindu mythology. And as always in such mythological stories, you have the good against the bad. So there is a good king. His name is Ram. And he is dealing with the other person, the bad king, who has taken his wife away. And to reach that place where he has to engage in a war, he has to build a bridge across from South India to what we call as Sri Lanka today, from the tip of India to Lanka. It used to be called Lanka even 3,000-4,000 years ago when the story was first written, the epic was first written. And in building this bridge, he's using all kinds of contribution from his army, which consists of monkeys and bears and a few human beings. So while this bridge is being built, as the story goes, one small squirrel comes and says, I also want to help to build this bridge. So as the story goes, Lord Ram, he's considered a god in India in the Hindu faith. He tells the squirrel, okay, you can also help. He says, go to the edge of the sea and dip your tail in the water. Bring your wet tail and roll it in the sand. And then take this little bit of sand that you collect on your tail and drop it on the bridge, on the big rocks that are being carried by the big baboons, the monkeys, the bears, and all the other animals that are helping in this effort of the Lord. So there's a saying in India that each of us are squirrels in our own way, and we make our own contribution to global security, global prosperity, global purpose. So that is the story I was just reminded of, saying that in this challenge of COVID-19, all of us, whether you're a doctor like Jamba, you are a medical professional, you are a food provider, you are a municipal person who's looking after the hygiene, sanitation, teachers, mothers, whatever, we all have to make our own contribution to deal with this challenge. That's the story, Jamba.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. That's by the way, our friend Uday told us he was a Navy officer. He didn't tell us that his rank was top admiral, therefore the very big boss. This is the problem. And I must say, I really enjoyed what you said. I've just only to say a small punctualization from the medical point of view. Mortality of COVID is not so high. For example, Ebola mortality is much higher. SARS, MERS mortality is very much higher. What is correct from the medical point of view is the adjective utilized, insidious. It goes and it spreads underground, beneath. You're not able to see it. But on the other way around, to utilize another adjective used is equitable, because it goes to everyone, being rich or poor, or prime minister like Mr. Johnson is a sort of in Italian there is the Divina Commedia, Divine Comedy, in which Dante was taking the people in Inferno, having the same penalty opposite of what they did in this life. Mr. Johnson began to say, COVID coronavirus is a problem of Italians. Poor guys, it's not our problem. Of top Britons, very OT, top 10, and now he is now positive as well. Therefore, it is equitable from this point of view. On the other way around also, I'm reading now a very nice book, History of the Future, by this Hebrew writer Yodari, and saying now the world is able, as defeated starvation, has defeated more or less wars, and he was saying has defeated pandemics. Well, this is not true, because actually we are seeing that we are not so todopoderoso, very omnipotent. There is a virus, a small tiny virus, that is kneeling all the world around. But let me stop down here and let's ask our guys, please, your comments, questions, reactions to the fascinating lecture of Dr. Professor Bashkar. Remember to switch on your microphone, of course.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Uday. I really enjoyed your words, but like just as a small comment, the bright side of this COVID pandemic crisis, like from now on, people or the whole world gonna prioritize the bright principles of life or for security in the correct order from now on. So let us hope after this crisis end over all the world, we will start seeing more research, more medical activities, more, I don't know, good activities for humanities, not just being secure by having nuclear weapons somewhere.
I hope you're right, because that is the right path.
Yeah.
So we hope that, what you're saying will come true. But I must add in my own way that I remain a bit less optimistic, because unfortunately the people who make decisions on behalf of most of us, whether you talk about the political class or the so-called multinational who control the levers of power, unfortunately they do not see many global issues in the same way. If they had, we would not have had the climate crisis, is my observation. But I hope you're right. Let's put it that way.
I would like to build on this last consideration, but first of all, an appreciation, then an observation and a question. My name is Maria, I'm from Pavia. The appreciation is for the amazing speech. It was very interesting and informative, so thank you so much. The observation concerns the needs of global solutions to achieve an equitable security. And we have seen that the private sector is not probably supporting this process. And we need sound institutions with global solutions. I would like to know your view concerning the role of institutions in these global problems and the possible directions they can take or we can take, because it's good. Each of us has a role as individual, but also our institutions can play a very important role in the ensuring security, especially when it has to do with the health and human security in general.
That's a very good observation, Maria, and a very good question. Let me try and respond to this. First of all, I think we need global solutions. That's point number one that we can assert, because these are global problems. So global problems need global approach and global consensus. That is very important. It's very unfortunate that today, when the world is dealing with the COVID challenge, that till yesterday, day before, China and the United States were completely, there's a lot of discord, bitterness between them. I hope it changes. China is accusing America of American soldiers bringing the virus to China, to Wuhan. American analysts, I've read a lot of American literature which says that this is China's biological warfare against the West, and that Italy is the starting point, all kinds of conspiracy theories. But your point is right. We need participation by the private sector because they have the capacity. We need participation by the individuals. And the state must enable, the state must not prevent such effort. And why I'm saying this is, today if you look at the private sector, almost every major government in the world has got some dependency or linkage with the private sector. Sometimes it is transparent and legitimate. Many times it is opaque and not legitimate. There are many parts of the world where there is a nexus between politics and criminality. This is the reality of the 20th, 21st century. But yet we have some very, I would say, committed individuals in the private sector who are willing to, as they say, put their mouth where their money is. And I know that in the larger global context, you keep reading about people like Mr. Bill Gates, who has contributed considerably to global solutions, global effort. There are names in Europe that I'm not able to remember immediately, but I have read about them. In India, because of the Corona challenge, we have an industrialist called Mr. Aziz Premji. He has just donated $7 billion of his personal wealth. He's committed 50,000 crores in Indian rupees, which is about 7 billion, for helping research and effort to deal with pandemics in the next few years. I'm sure there are other examples in the world, I don't know them. So I think the private sector and the institutions have a very important role to play, but so does the individual, because global solutions will be triggered, catalyzed by the creativity of the individual. It is people like you, fellows in Pavia, professors like Jamba and his colleagues, those who have applied their whole life, spent their whole life in creating knowledge, in refining knowledge. You know, I keep saying that every PhD that the world produces, a good PhD, deepens the global water table by a small amount. But we have to make sure that the quality of the water in that water table is appropriate. It's not contaminated. That's why you need integrity, rigor of research, knowledge. And now that you mentioned it, Maria, I just suddenly remembered, tomorrow is the 31st of March. And it is the 293rd or 294th birth anniversary, I think, of Isaac Newton, the famous Isaac Newton. And again, if my memory serves me right, Newton did his greatest work during the plague in Europe, in UK, when his university was shut down, and he was sent away home for 2 years. All universities in Britain at that time, in late 17th century, when Newton was in college as a young student, he went home to rural England, as they say. I'm remembering a story I read somewhere. And he sat under the tree thinking. He was a man just sitting under a tree and thinking. And the apple fell on his head, to give you a dramatic story. And gravity was understood. And then, of course, there's the whole Newton's laws of physics, etc. But to me, what is amazing every time I think of the story of Newton is that this is the silver lining of a pandemic or an epidemic or whatever. And global knowledge was furthered or advanced by one man, one creative man who had no computers, no books, no nothing, no people. He just used his mind and came up with the formulation of gravity. And I'm not an expert on Newton, but whatever little bit I read as a young man, I mean, he's one of those. There are many extraordinary people, I think, in global history. Europe has produced many of them. So have other parts of the world. We know little less about them, more about Europe because of the way we understand global history. But I'm repeating this point, Maria. Sorry, this is a long answer. I think Jamba and Stefania know I always give long answers. But the individual has the individual, the creative individual, I think also will make a very important contribution. And therefore, the ecosystem that the state and the institution, the private sector can create is to irrigate the ecosystem so that these flowers, these trees, these things can grow. And that's what I think Pavia did. That's what I think the Chekhov Fellowship did for me. It created an environment, an ecosystem where I could talk to people like, Jamba is one example. There were other colleagues there. Simonetta was there, other professors, students. I learned a lot from students. I don't know where they are. Rosario, I wonder where he is. Giovanna, various other names that come to mind. We used to sit in the mess and have long discussions. I'm a cigar smoker. I don't smoke it now. But we would sit in the evening over our drinks and cigar and have long discussions. I remember Jamba telling me to give up cigars. Jamba, you'll be happy to know I've given up.
Careful, that is not correct for your health to smoke too much.
But let me stop here. Maria, I hope I've given you some response. I'll stop.
By the way, be careful because Maria is our professor of economics of development. Therefore, okay. She's very much into. I would like to underline and emphasize some of your words when you were speaking about doctorates. Doctoral people, students, specifically working, for example, in the field of water. Most of your listeners now are here in Italy exactly for this very reason, and is also listening our friend Marco, that is a representative of the Italian Agency of for Cooperation and Development, and these guys are here exactly for doing what you are saying, and I would like you to re-emphasize a little bit on their behalf for all of them waiting for us, what is the meaning of their studies as doctoral students dealing with wash system, water and sanitation and hygiene and health. Moreover, in this specific moment of history in which we are speaking about hygiene, public health, problems that we were saying given for granted. Everything was given for granted. We had also the foolishness of having no vax people quarreling against vaccine because everything was given for granted. Now the situation is a bit changed. You said that these pandemics will change a lot of things in the culture, in mentality, in how the people will afford the future. But I would like you to give a inspiring words to our doctorate students that are listening to you now?
You know, I think I will only share the following based on my experience. I think all of you who are in Pavia now as fellows, you should, I think, maximize your time and the opportunity that you have there to deepen your own water table in whichever way or whichever field you're working on, and have the conviction that whenever you go back to your respective countries, to your institutions, that you will be able to contribute. Whether or not you can make the big difference like Isaac Newton is a question mark. We are not all Isaac Newtons. But you should have the conviction that you can make a contribution. And, you know, whenever I think about security, my approach used to be that, again, I'm going back to an Indian understanding. You have heard the story of the elephant and the blind men, the 5 blind men who touched the elephant. And each person thinks that the elephant is made up of the part that he touches. So the man who touches the tusk, the blind man says, the elephant is a very hard animal. The man who touches the tail thinks that it's a very small, stringy animal, like that. Since I'm a security analyst, I try to look at issues from security angle perspective and, you know, my own reading of the subject. I keep talking about harmonious, equitable, sustainable. I want to add one more element here, which is something that I have distilled for the last 20, 30 years, which is that I hope that the COVID challenge, the subvirus challenge today, will make the world aware that we have to, I mean, to use a Gandhi kind of expression, the world must replace greed with need. Mahatma Gandhi used to say, all of you know Mahatma Gandhi, that there is enough in the world for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. And I think the whole experience of capitalism after the end of the Cold War was a case of pandering to greed. I have said this in our nuclear discussions with the professionals, with people in government when I used to be in the service, that the world needs to define sufficiency. How many nuclear weapons do I need? How many tanks do I need? How many aircraft do I need, etc., etc. And accordingly regulate the investment that we make. So in the same way, I think when we talk about water, since Jamba mentioned water, this is my personal reading, that for large parts of the developing world, for sure, I don't know much about the developed world and their programs, but Asia and Africa are likely to face very severe water deprivation challenges. We in the subcontinent, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, together if you see include Nepal and Sri Lanka, Bhutan, etc., you are talking about a demography which is almost 2 billion people, little under 2 billion. And water table is falling. And where water is available, it is polluted. And I think this is going to cause severe human security challenges unless technology comes up with some solution, which it may. I have great respect for technology. I don't know how and when it will happen. But I think those who are working in development, those who are working in water, sanitation, hygiene, this could well become the next most important, I think, area for public policy and for human security. And as I said, I don't know the respective disciplines that the fellows are engaged in, but I just want you to keep this in mind that your work would be very important in the years ahead. And I hope you can make your own contribution, not only for your individual locations, but also in a collective way, because I think we need to go back to Maria's point. We need global solutions. This is going to be a global challenge. Jamba.
Thanks a lot. And well, I don't know if someone of the people listening will become the next Isaac Newton. Guys, for the moment, you cannot go around, but you can try to buy an apple, throw the apple in the air, stay down, wait the apple to fall on your head, and reinvent gravity or something else. Anyway, some questions, please. By the way, Uday, how long can you stay with us?
I'm okay. I mean, we are locked down, so I have a fair amount of time. I don't know about y'all.
All right. Therefore, people, is someone wishing to pose a question to our speaker?
Yes,
Go.
I would like
Go.
to ask a question. Okay, my name is Aliona, and I'm from the University of Pavia, graduated from the master's program degree, World Politics, International Relations. And I would like to ask about the political side of the crisis that can appear after the pandemic. And as we know that probably, I don't know, I just want to ask you, what do you think about this? So a lot of countries probably now are violating constitutions and taking some human rights from people by introducing all kinds of measures to protect the population from the spread of the pandemic. And probably, as for example, it is in Europe, some countries, they already act against the constitutions. And maybe, can it be like a threat to the, so maybe it can be like the fact that it can be the backsliding, democratic backsliding. So probably the regimes like, okay, I'm sorry, just a little bit confused with my question.
No, I think I understand. Yeah.
Yes, I'm asking if it's possible the appearance of a large number of dictatorships after, like, as a part of this political crisis. Because democracies, they're introducing the measures, and people, they don't see it because they are scared and they want to follow them. So while nobody sees it, it can be a secret move away from the democracy. What do you think about this?
No, I think it's again a very good observation, Salona, and a very good question. Let me give you my initial responses as you are asking the question. First of all, I think personally that there is a very high probability that global geopolitics, global geoeconomics, and I think even the global geophysical understanding is going to undergo a change. Will it be a large change? Will it be a small change? Will depend, I think, on the path that this virus is going to take in individual countries. Again, some of you in the physical sciences would be familiar with the expression path dependency. So if you take a surface and you subject it to greater heat or greater pressure, the particles move sometimes in an erratic way that you are not expecting. And whichever path the particle takes, we talk about the dependency of how the particle will finally stabilize depending on which path it takes. So like that, I can share the experience in India. Maybe you can extrapolate to the experience in Italy. In Europe today, Italy and Spain are two countries, two societies that have been most affected by the current challenge. Perhaps, we do not know, maybe England, Britain could go through a similar experience. But if you take these three case studies in Europe and India and the United States as different examples, immediately it would be fair to say that the politics of each of these countries will be shaped or impacted by the experience of COVID-19. We do not know how many people would regrettably die. Day before yesterday, we heard Dr. Fauci, the United States senior medical member in the Trump cabinet, saying that perhaps the US deaths could be between 100,000 to 200,000. We hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, US politics will change in a very, I think, significant manner. Similarly, if Britain goes through an extreme example, I think it will impact British politics. You know more about Italian politics and what will happen in Italy if this challenge is not contained in a quick manner. In India, for example, at the moment, we do not know what will happen tomorrow, day after. We have just crossed the 1,000 mark in terms of, this is the answer to Yashwant and others who asked me. As of yesterday, the number of confirmed cases in India crossed 1,000. It was 1,071 at lunch, 12 o'clock today, in a population of 1.3 billion. A lot of people say India has not carried out enough testing. Some people say the virus has become slightly mild in India because of heat. Again, we don't know. Some people talk about herd immunity. But many Indians have acquired immunity because of the local conditions and genetic factors. Again, we don't know. But if the mortality rate in India, some experts from Johns Hopkins, United States, Europe have said that the number of people who finally are affected and which could lead to deaths in India might touch 500,000. We do not know now. But they are saying that by the time we come to May, India could have fatalities of that order. If that happens, God forbid, Indian politics would also change. And I expect, because of our demography, India would have large-scale internal security challenges. We could have food riots. Already you can see in India, because of the dislocation, we have something called migrant workers, those who come from the villages to work in the cities. They do not have permanent homes. They live in very difficult situations. Many of them were forced to go home. The state has now said you cannot go back because of community transmission. So now they are being held in certain centers where they are being given food and some temporary shelter till India finishes 21 days of the clampdown. Today we are in day 5. My fear, that of many of my colleagues, is that if this is not contained, the state will have a problem of civil disorder, starting with food riots, and then criminality. People will be out on the streets. There'll be looting and ransacking, some very extreme possibilities, which will change Indian politics and Indian polity. And that could lead to a return of an authoritarian regime. But, and this is an important but, the state, whether in India or in Italy, does not have the capacity to deal with a mass turbulence. Whether you want to use the word revolution or uprising or hunger, state across the world, including the most authoritarian regimes, and let me close on China. I follow the Chinese discourse very closely. Very often at night, I'm looking at Chinese social media, translations, websites, and groups outside China, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, etc., that provide some insight. One of the possibilities when we talk about global politics is not that Trump may not be re-elected. That's possible. Not that Modi may not get the support of the Indian people. That's possible. But Xi Jinping may face opposition from within his own Communist Party cadres, and that we may have a situation of a China with a different leadership. China will not become democratic. If you look at 3,000 to 4,000 years of Chinese history, the emperor has always been unseated because of a revolution or because of an external force. This is the fear. I go to China, I used to go sometimes in the past, and they say that no Chinese leader can sleep peacefully at night because he doesn't know if he will be the next to be unseated. So I, as an analyst, I'm just saying the probability that global politics will change is relatively high. Yes, for the short term, there may be a return to a more authoritarian state. But in the long term, I think there would be a lot of turbulence, and we hope that what emerges would be a more equitable socio-political order than what we have today. Again, that's a long answer, Salona, but I hope it gives you some.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for your answer. But can I also add a comment, if it's possible? I'm scared that this crisis can, as you said, can cause the appearance of authoritarian regimes, but this is another step away from the global cooperation. And if we don't have any global cooperation, it's really hard to contain the virus, as we see in this situation. Because, for example, China, they have the authoritarian regime, so this is why they just didn't provide us the right information. So the global community couldn't even get ready for the virus, for the pandemic. So just it's so complex, this problem, and multifaceted.
No, you're right. And we need a global solution. And I'm repeating what I've said in the past. A global solution needs global thinking. If you look at every time the world had a crisis, the answers were found by what we call in India, again, the term is Vad, Vivad, Samvad, meaning that you have an argument, a counter argument, and then you distill and come up with some consensus. I think the global intellectual community must apply their mind and start the process of evolving what could be the appropriate template for global, shall we say, the new global contour. We speak now with the benefit of history about Europe in the 20th century between the two wars, when Europe was dealing with fascism, and the experience of that period that allowed the thinkers in Europe to come up with a new blueprint that laid the foundation for the European Union. It was done by the thinkers, by the academics, the intellectuals, who I think provided the necessary irrigation to the political leadership and to the private sector, those who create wealth. Then we had the end of the Cold War, from the Cold War to the post-Cold War, where again many thinkers, many people across the world gave some contribution. I don't think the world got it right, because we got carried away by capitalism and I think greed, profit, etc. This is my reduction. Today, I think centers like Pavia, and I'm suggesting this to Jamba for your consideration, when this challenge is hopefully behind us, that the creative, element, whether it's in Pavia, other places, you have a good network, should think of what could be the appropriate template, hypothetically, for an Italy that will harmonize with a new Europe only in terms of a post-corona Europe, and how that in turn will link with the rest of the Western world, and how the Western world, as we understand it, would relate to the East, where you have China and India, and how all of them would relate to Africa and Latin America, so that you have again the global collective kind of empathy in our thinking, because each region would need its own template, and within the region there would be a need to disaggregate. I can only speak about my part of the world, that is Southern Asia, and today when you talk about Southern Asia, I think it is from Saudi Arabia to Indonesia, the entire crescent. Each society, each culture, each region has its own gender and cultural issues that need to be understood. And the new template that the global order needs, I think the thinking has to come from the creative individuals, from the intellectuals who are applying their minds. And again, we are like the blind man and the elephant. I constantly repeat this point, that whatever we even consider for purposes of academic discussion as a round table, whether it's an economic model that Maria would be looking at, or a government model that Marco would be looking at, that it must pass the test of the tripod. It must be equitable, it must be sustainable, it must be harmonious. And unless we start that process, I think, arriving at that, wherever we want to, I think, pause and reflect and see which way the world should take. But we know that the old model will not work. Profit for the sake of profit, diluting the state, reducing expenditure. We in India are going through this. We have reduced our investment in health, in education, in infrastructure, and we are now paying a price. I'm sure Italy must be doing its own internal reviews. I know Great Britain, earlier Great Britain, now Britain after Brexit is doing its own internal. I keep following the American debates where they are talking about the fact that public health is in shambles and only the rich can get access to certain facilities and so on. So this is and we don't know China. I think China, there is a lot of information that is yet to come out, and Jamba, you are the medical expert here. I hope the WHO would allow a global narrative that is factual about the origin of the COVID. Unless we start there, we don't know where the problem that we are facing. Like this, I think there are many strands we need to address. Jamba.
Yeah, no, the problem is that what I was considering while you were answering to our student is that also we have to take into account something you quoted in your presentation, that is technology. Now we are discussing together, a lot of people from India, Czech Republic, from Palestine, from Italy, etc., all together sharing our thoughts just in the same time. And this was absolutely unheard before. Is a new situation in the world. This could also be, well, it's helpful to spread fake news, but it's also helpful to share these things. And for example, if you remember what happened with the SARS, in SARS epidemics in 2001, 2, 3, China was extremely more reluctant to give information on what was happening. Now I'm not sure if they are more democratic or forced to do because it was going around. The one thing I say to my students in a situation when happened the golpe in Moscow against Yeltsin in 1991, it was blocked because there was a small factory nearby the White House in Moscow connected with internet, and they were going around spreading the news on what was going on, and this destroyed the possibility of a usual reaction because the golpers, they acted in the usual way. They blocked the radio, they blocked the telephone calls, they blocked the TV, but they didn't block this small internet point because no one was knowing about internet. Therefore, this hopefully could be something that could help. We have also to remember another issue, very interesting. The Black Plague put in shambles Europe in 1350. After that, 1/3 of the European population killed, 50 million casualties. These, according to some historians, gave a start to the Renaissance because of the changes. Well, correct. I'm not sure for the people dying in 1350, they didn't care too much of the Renaissance 1.5 centuries later. But first of all, we try not to die now. Secondarily, we are a society running a lot quicker than in the past, and therefore the changes will happen, I think, very much before. Well, guys, I'm awfully afraid of perusing too much our guest because now in Delhi is 9 o'clock in the evening. Is there some other burning question to pose to our guest? Please go.
I have a question, if I may.
Go.
Yeah, my name is Ahmad again. I'm from Jordan, doing my PhD in Brescia in water environmental engineering. And I have good experience in WASH in field. Before 3 days, I participated in some webinar about policies and the current situations and how, or like trying to find solutions to fill the gap between policies in WASH specifically and the field and what is going on site. One of the main important point was like even policies is there, it exists, but applying policies in different circumstances, in different situations, in different places even, that's, I don't know, it's a still gap, and we couldn't find the solutions for that. For me personally, I have worked in a crisis as a WASH engineer. Always there is like a difficulties in applying policies. So how we can, under these situations, finding a global solutions to solve these water issues in the world. This is one point. The other point is, in the same time, while we are looking for like a high level solutions in terms of policy or even in terms of technology, we are facing a problem in a very basic things, which is awareness against wash, and like even to the level of hand washing, not just in Africa or in developing countries, but even in Europe. So I just also want to know about your opinion about these things and how we can fill the gaps between the high level that we are looking for and the on-site situations, specifically lack of awareness for WASH things. Thank you.
I think first of all, what I would propose is that those who have to leave because of the interest of time, please feel free. And if you want to send an email, Stefania has my email ID.
No, Uday, don't worry. We'll take you again for another meeting in the next weeks.
But on this question, I'd like to request Marco, if he's able to come in. Because if I've understood, Jamba, you are in the government, you are in one of the Italian agencies. You have experience of policy, executing policy on the ground. So what Mohammed is saying, maybe you would like to share, because I have been an analyst, and we are often told that analysts do not live in the real world. We sit in the armchair and come up with all kinds of, interpretations. So Marco, if you would like to perhaps respond to Mohammed's question or observation.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, before answering, I would like to just to point a little bit some points that were raised from you and also from Jamba. I like, Jamba, your reference to the Renaissance, and because I think that in general terms, I hope that this crisis will somehow give us the possibility to rethink to development, because in my opinion, I'm, as you said, I'm working in the Italian Agency for Italian Cooperation, so I'm working with on the ground to think to policies and to projects to aim at development. And my question is always this one. Are we sure that we are doing the right thing when we think to the project, to the intervention as agency? Because in my opinion, the Renaissance gave us one important lesson, which is the importance of difference and the richness of difference. In the Renaissance, we had Italy with many small states competing each other with their own, each of them with their own individual richness in terms of economy, culture, society, and this gave us this great progress in every I would say aspect of life, philosophy, science, and so on. Similarly, I would say that richness, so difference, and not only a global way of thinking that is focused only on greed, as you said. In my opinion, this crisis maybe could give this possibility to really to rethink development and to rethink the way we want to develop, trying to value differences, cultural differences. Earlier on, we talk about Newton, and Jamba, you said about Newton, but Newton, without nothing, had the possibility and the ability to discover the gravity. And I think that with the different culture, we may be able to give a global response to crisis, which is now the COVID. But okay, this is a very important crisis, but I think that we are facing a more important, the most important one is the climate change and the pressure we are giving to the natural capital. I don't know if sorry, just a moment. No, Lorenzo. Sorry, my small child is just a moment.
Our greetings to him.
But Mohammed, if I can come back to your question that you made about policy, and as you said, it sounds very good for us to make these points and observations in a group like this. But the real challenge is, how do you convert good thoughts, good ideas into policy? And that is where politics comes into play. So I feel, and this is a very tentative thought, that we will have a post-corona world, all of us in different ways. And we have to see how that will impact the politics of the country that we belong to and the region. Since you're from Jordan, I'm just taking the liberty of making a suggestion or a thought, observation, that the water crisis in all of West Asia, will it have an impact on how regional cooperation would become better? Or will the existing regional tension, any problem, whether we talk about Palestine, Israel, Jordan, what is happening as far as Iraq, Iran, Saudi, ISIS, there are so many problems there. Whether the bigger challenge, it could be COVID, corona, water, air, whatever, will it create the situation for more cooperative politics? If that happens, then I think the world would have learned perhaps the appropriate lesson. But I come back to my original kind of thing, saying that if you are an academic, if you are an intellectual, if you are a professional, you have to see what kind of an intervention you can make. An intervention at the conceptual level, academically in terms of thought, or what is the intervention you can make at the policy level. I mean, if you are in Jordan, in the Jordanian government, as an advisor, as a consultant, maybe when you go back, you could propose something that would be, as I said, of a different contour, to put it mild, to put it in that way, a different template, different framework to deal with the same challenges or the same problems. I mean, that's how I would suggest that you should approach it in your individual capacity. I hope that helps, Mohammed, in terms of giving some response to your question.
Yes, thank you so much for both of you. Thank you.
Okay, guys, I would like to stay here for a long time more, but I don't want to abuse of the availability of our guest. But according to the fact that I'm horribly afraid that will be locked down for a couple of months more, in the more optimistic let's say, projection, I kindly ask our friend Uday if we'll be allowed to ask you again another meeting, let's say in 1 month from now. We would enjoy a lot to take a little bit of your wisdom and your experience in this kind of, that comes from the huge wisdom of India, of all Indian culture, that is an enrichment for all of us. Therefore, for the moment, but only for the moment, I thank you a lot and give you all my thanks. And this is not a bye-bye, but is a see you soon, hasta luego, in a very, very short time. Thank you very, very much. Switch on your, everybody switches on his microphone and go with a clap, clap, clap.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I just want you all to know that I feel I'm part of the Chief family. So whenever y'all decide to have another chat, please let me know. But thank you and namaste.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
From Maria. Okay.
Hi, Stefania.
Guys,
Hi.
bye-bye.
Guys, thank you from Maria because she had some problems on her microphone.
No problem.
Speak. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, Dominic. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. We'll be in touch. Take care.
Guys,
Bye.
it's a little bit too late now to discuss of all the other things we will discuss. Therefore, I beg Alona to prepare a short report that we will circulate to everybody. And next week we will discuss, because there are some news going on about the possibility of preparing videos, etc., etc. Is ongoing now. In the next few days, Pavia University will start a platform specifically devoted to this kind of things, and we will invite also the press agent of the university to speak to us about these possibilities. Therefore, for the moment, take care of you. Tell me.
Go. I would like to first of all to thank for the invitation, and just to tell you, to everybody, that we have prepared the PFK student page in the website, which is still not online because it's basically now still empty of materials. So from now to next week, we can discuss how to fill it. It's just up to you with videos, photos, and what you prefer. Maybe next week we can meet again, and so we can speak about also the student page and discuss how to contribute. Okay.
At this point, I guess that we can greet each other. Please take care of you. If you want to have it in Latin, cave COVID, and be careful. And see you next week at 4 o'clock, next Monday. It's all right?
Okay.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.